welcome to today's episode of Decisions Now. I'm Erin Pearson, your host, along with my co-host, Rigvinath Chevala, and we are super excited to have Josh Starmer on our podcast today. Welcome, Josh.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Cool. So, Josh, one of the things that I think is so cool is you started StatQuest a few years ago on YouTube, and since then you have, if I'm not mistaken, around 780,000 followers on YouTube, and you've had over like 18 or maybe far more than that million views across all of your videos that you've been posting. So what you do is you make statistics, DA, AI, analytics, and everything like a lot easier for people to learn.
That's the plan.
Well, it's working because I watched some of your videos. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is so cool. And it's the way you explain it with the graphics.
Oh,
they're
great.
pretty basic, but also very powerful.
Yeah.
Great job.
Oh, thank you very much.
I think you have a couple of really cool nicknames too. You're the patron saint of Silicon Valley, or the Bill Nye of data analytics, or a couple kind of fun names like that. Yeah, well, that's cool.
That's what people put in the comments sometimes.
Well, I'd have to say, if it were me, I'd get like such a big ego boost that I'd have trouble just like coming down from that afterwards. It's always nice to get the positive comments on YouTube.
It is nice to hear nice things about myself. I'm not arguing with that.
So for anyone who isn't familiar with Josh, one of the things that you do is you also turn, you not only make it easy to learn, but you turn a lot of these things into songs and music to really make it also memorable to people as well. So for those who stick around to the end, we're going to challenge Josh to make us a little song as well.
Can't wait.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
So one of the things that we wanted to talk a little bit about and pick your brain on is how to verify and trust AI and the results that people are getting. So when people are actually running different modeling, or they're doing different interpretations of data, like what kind of questions should they ask to just like test what they're actually doing to see if it is a valid outcome?
I guess, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of things that we used to do in statistics that we're supposed to do in machine learning and sort of data science, and we don't. And so when in doubt, we can always basically try to calculate error or error bars. So like, plus, like when you get a poll, they say like Herman is beating, I don't know, Peter in a poll, and he, and it's by, it's like 53 to 42 at plus or minus 4 points. That plus or minus thing is something that we often don't think about when we think about machine learning. We just think of like, oh, that's the output. But we don't often associate like with error with the output. And I think that's something that needs to come into fashion is people need to be a little more rigorous with their machine learning. It's also helpful. There are these things called Shapley values or SHAP values. And I can't, they're related and they're kind of different. And I can never remember which one is which, but the general idea for both of them is that they give you a sense of which variables are playing a very important part in your model. And they also give you a sense of like what the input for each variable, what that represents in terms of the output. And what's great is they can be used on everything. So it used to be before these Shapley values were around. And there's some other permutations around there. So we're gonna just lump them all together under the banner of Shapley. But there are these. But it used to be, decision trees were awesome, even though they have very limited capabilities. They were awesome because they were very explainable. You could say, given this data, I can tell you exactly how we made that prediction. And so you can kind of just look at it and you can look at the model and try to and actually see what's happening. And you can spot like biases that you may not have seen in the original data. You can, it's very helpful to be able to interrogate the model that way. but with these new, relatively new, excuse me, Shap/Shapley and other things, etc. What we can do is we can apply that same sort of interrogation to even so-called black box models like neural networks or support vector machines and things like that. So we've got newer tools. We've got old tools such as statistics, and we've got newer tools like these Shapley things that we could maybe use a little bit more in both cases than we have or people are doing quite right now in order to understand what we're doing and understand what those predictions mean and where they come from and how they relate to the underlying data.
Sure. I think, at least from my side, I come from a world, of course, of like marketing statistics, sales statistics as well. And I think one of the things, to the point that you were making, especially on like the error side of it, is there always is an error, or like you don't know the actual like background numbers. 2/3 of something, if the 3 is your absolute number, is a very different statistical number than if you have like 3,000 data points or 3 million data points put in. So I think also understanding like the background of like what is the data set and making sure that people do understand what are these statistics made out of or what is actually going into the data that people are using is really critical to then basing the understanding of like, or the output of the data and using it to actually drive actions, because you have to understand what was the input and not just here's the story that the person put around these numbers that they're providing.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. You know, that thing you just said about the sample size making a big difference is hits. You know, it's like it hits the nail right on the head. You know, you need to know what you want your model to represent and whether the data actually represents that population you're interested in, right? You know, if they're not related, if you get a small sample set from one subpopulation of people, like kids under the age of 10, but you want this model to be used on adults over the age of 40, then there's going to be some problems. And so it's always important to know sort of where the data is coming from, what you want the data to do, what you want the model to do, and how much data you have. If you like, just like what you were saying, if you don't have much data, well, maybe you should have a little less confidence in the output than in, you know, compared to if you had tons and tons and tons of data from that population you're trying to
and I think one of
target.
the recent things that I can relate to, and I was talking to Erin about this. So we just did a trip to Europe and a bunch of international flights. So you know how these sites, the travel websites, have price predictors. My guess is that they're not optimized for international flights. They're optimized for North American flights because that's probably where most of the data that they've collected is from. So every time I checked, it just said it's going to go down. It's going to go down. It never went down. Like, so I just, pulled the trigger and bought my tickets. But that's where the confidence comes in, right? And to your point, I don't think these guys disclose where they got their data from to begin with.
Yeah, and you just see a point estimate. You don't really see, like, you don't see error bars on that. If it said the price is going to go down, but the error bars are massive, you'd be like, maybe I'm not going to trust this prediction. That kind of thing. Or if it says it's going to go down, the error bars are super tight. You're like, well, maybe I should have confidence in this. But then even like what you said, if the data is not from where it's supposed to be, it doesn't relate to what it's trying to tell. Sure, it can be super confident, because it's got tons of domestic data, but still really a terrible model. So yeah, I think it's a great example of how sort of things cannot be what we expect them to be, even when we have lots of data.
So just to pick on that point a bit more, now, what if you do have like the right data set, or you have a great data set that you're using, but models drift over time as well? So it obviously depends on exactly what you're doing, what the data set is. And there's like major world events that it can change overnight when you actually need to rerun it. But when you're just talking in more general terms, how do you actually create this like consistency of evaluation, and how often do you need to change that?
Yeah, so I guess the short version is to just say there's no rest for the weary. So once you finish your model, you've got it all, you've spent 6 months or a year even maybe collecting and curating and wrangling your data and you finally got it working and everything's great, that's not the time to sit back and put your feet up. That's your time to like start collecting data like crazy about how well your model's performing in the wild. um and yeah, it's just I mean I it sort of depends on what your resources are, but I would think in sort of how important it is to keep that model on point. But I would think it'd be a continuous thing where you'd always be evaluating and collecting more data, even though you collected so much data to train that thing. You got to keep collecting it, just like you said, in order to make sure you're not drifting and that the model still
And do you
is doing what you think it
and
is.
what's your experience, I guess, from a business standpoint, right? So do corporates realize that there's going to be this drift over time? And because I've seen some projects that they say, hey, let's
I,
deploy this model, and then off you go, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably different at every company. I know some are very aware of these things. Depends on how savvy they are, right? Some, it's a tough thing, right? Because I think you bring up a good point in that one thing that's happening right now is machine learning is becoming easier to
Right.
do and more cost effective, or the price
Hmm.
for doing it is much more reasonable than it used to be. Um, and so yeah, so there's going to be smaller companies with less resources sort of diving in to the deep end, and they may not know all the details of these things, and they may not be aware that it's not just the model. You're not done right then and there. You actually have to. It's like anything. It's like a pet. You got to take care of it. Go take it for a walk every day. Not many people think of it like that. That is something that requires care. So yeah, it probably depends on the company, but I'd be willing to bet with the ease of entry and the lower cost of entry, that there's going to be some learning curve in terms of like model maintenance in the near future. That it's an important thing.
Yeah. Hashtag modeling is never
Yeah,
done.
that's right.
Um,
Yeah.
um, you had actually made an interesting point about like how often can models really get to reality as well. Is there a best practice to telling if your model is actually like in sync with reality? Because reality kind of changes depending on the perspective that you have, and how you're looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like anything. Well, it's not like anything, but it's like a lot of things. Um, it helps to have some definition of what you want the model to do. What exactly is the target audience, and have that pretty well defined or specified. And then then you can just benchmark against that, right? If you don't really, that's something that maybe people don't always think about, that they just think, oh, I'll just get some data and I'll create this model and I'll be able to predict who's going to want to watch this TV show or something like that, or I'm going to be able to predict who's going to want to buy this product or something like that. Sure. I mean, depends on the stakes or whatever, uh, but yeah, if you've got a good specification, what your target audience is, adults versus kids, things like that, then you can sort of benchmark against that. And to be honest, it may be actually worth trying to see how, if your target audience is even using it. I mean, maybe when you go out and you collect your data and you're like, oh, we've sampled all these adults, and when the adults use the algorithm, it gives them the specified results that we've spec'd out and everything. But in the wild, is it really adults using it? Who knows? So it may be worth double checking those things. Yeah, I just feel like the longer we're talking, the deeper into the pit of despair we're going, because there's so many little things you got to keep track of.
Yeah, so you really have to understand this. Okay, so if I were to summarize that, you have to essentially you start with a hypothesis that the model is going to experiment
Yeah,
with, and then you have to check to see first, were you correct on your hypothesis, because it's possible that you just
yeah,
weren't, and then within that, is it actually telling you the story, or what is the story that you're really looking for it to tell, and then test how does it actually work within the audience set that is using
yeah.
it. And I guess depending on what it's getting used for, is it giving them the answer that makes them want to reuse it over and over again as well if you're trying to build a
Yeah.
business off of it
Yeah,
also.
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and it's not just about cleaning up the data and creating the model. It's a lot of more
Well,
philosophical
there's this whole
issues at
behavioral
hand.
Yeah,
patterns that come in as
sure.
well, right? So if a few years ago, or I'd say even
Yeah,
a decade or more ago, Thanksgiving sales, was a thing, but not really on the e-commerce side. And so literally the patterns changed. And if I have to buy a TV, I'm going to wait till November, right? And so that wasn't the case
yeah,
before. So then what happened here is, at least in my view, is some of these algorithms that came in, or even the behavioral cyclical things that was applied as a pattern, now changes the model, right? So you can't expect high sales in September or October. That is part of the model now, which in the past it wasn't. So at some
yeah,
point, the the
yeah.
the behavior as a result of the algorithm being used then needs to be fed back, right? Because the behavior changed as a result of that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah.
Hmm. On
The
the output.
model itself can have an effect
Right.
on on the model. That's awesome.
So, oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Now, I was just gonna ask like the
So
flip side of that question, right?
go ahead,
So
Rigvinath.
it's great if you achieve the sync or the
Yeah.
reality with the model. What happens in case you don't? Like, what's the opposite? Like, when do you know to kill it or not use it?
Well, I mean, before you kill it and just walk away, you should always think, is there a way to repurpose this? Maybe it's not what I imagined it was going to be. Maybe it's different, but maybe it's still useful. Um, because
Mm,
modeling can be very expensive, especially if you've got some massive computer cluster training everything. It's always worth maybe reevaluating what the model's for, and if
yeah.
you can't think of something, then fine, yeah, walk away. But I would say the first thing you do is see if you can repurpose it for something else. Like I said, if your
Hmm.
target audience originally was adults, but it's only kids using it, and they keep returning, well,
Hmm.
maybe you're like, okay, well, this is for kids, and maybe you can then focus on them, and I don't know. I mean, there's a yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a tough call. It may also just boil down to what your budget is, right? If
Hmm.
if you're not seeing results and your budget is small,
Yeah. I
well,
mean,
then it's
that's a
time
good point
to
you
move
bring up,
on.
right? I think financial metrics is a key, at least should be a key part of that decision for the businesses. And if you think of anything, forget
Yeah,
just statistical models, even a project, a product, a business plan, anything for that matter, always is susceptible to the sunk cost fallacy, which is kind of where you were going, right? Is, you've already spent time in modeling,
yeah,
invested money, time, and now it doesn't serve that purpose. Do you continue doing that or do you kill it, right? And typically the framework that most
yeah,
businesses follow is the financial metrics, the success criteria, if they've met that or not, or if it's redundant,
yeah,
or like you said, no longer useful for that particular target group. You kind of just evaluate along those
yeah.
lines and then make that decision objectively.
Yeah. It may also be worth looking at the training statistics. Why from your training your model. Um, I don't know how helpful this would be, but you could look and you could say, oh, it looks like our model is improving still at a pretty good rate, and that we just stopped training
Mm-hmm.
it because we ran out of data or ran out of time or something like that. But it looks like maybe we could go further because we're seeing, if this is like the top, of the say like we want 100,
Mm-hmm.
ideally we'd have 100% accuracy. We're never going to get that, but say like we're at like
Mm-hmm.
70%, but we're still like climbing very quickly and it's just kind of cuts off. I mean, you can always look at things like that and go, well, maybe we should try to get more data. Maybe we can, maybe if it's a neural network, maybe we should train it a little bit longer. Some what's I mean, some things like
Mm-hmm.
lightning. which is a company I work for, allows you to just add more training cycles to whatever your neural network is without having to start over. You can just do a couple more epochs and go, hey, now it works. And so it's worth looking at it from that like a very technical perspective as well, and just saying technically. Our model still has room for improvement. It looks like it's still improving. So let's just let it go for another few days and see what we get.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can apply that same concept really to anywhere in business. I mean, it's the whole concept of the pivot as well. So and I think part of it is going in with the mindset probably of thinking you might not hit the nail on the head on the very first round. And if you go in with that perspective, it's also easier to understand how you might need to adapt it and change it over time. And you don't just like fall in love with your first hypothesis and you're just gonna like coddle it until there's nothing left as well. So one of the other topics that we had as well was change management within organizations. So I think when we start to talk about all of the things that people are able to do today and how it's easier to do this, and like the barrier to entry is whether or not it's getting easier, at least people are getting more interested in it. So they're learning a little bit more about it. But how do you attract people into different things, especially for those very highly qualified roles? They tend to gravitate towards like these really cutting edge areas. So how can you, at any organization that you're in, how can you really pull somebody in and interest them?
Oh, that's a great question. And I don't really know the answer to that specific one, because halfway through your question, I started thinking of another another thing, another option, which is and because I've seen this. Companies have started reaching out to me specifically to start training their management to become more data science savvy, to know more about machine learning, to do not all of them are interested in hands-on things, but I guess the idea is you can work with the people you have. You don't always have to hire from the outside, and you can, I mean, if people are interested and they're willing, sort of gain some new skills that they didn't have before. And the idea being, the companies that I was talking to, they were like, we don't really care, about the individual. I mean, they care about the individual people, but the goal is like, if we just train them all, some of them are going to have great insights that are really going to propel this company. And so we're just going to train all of them. We're not going to try to identify the best and the brightest up front. We're just going to, that's one of the nice things about sort of online and sort of like Zoom conference calls is I can talk to 5 people or I can talk to 2,000 people, and it's the same, relatively speaking. And so they're like, we're just going to get everyone on the call, and and some of them it won't sink in, and some of them it will, and we're just hoping to get a handful of people that have this skill set and can help the company overall.
That's
So that's what I've
that's
been
pretty
seeing
interesting,
personally.
because you mentioned 2 things, right? One is management, like they're asking the management to be trained. That's one very critical step. And then the fact that everyone's involved is another one. Is then literally that makes your overall change management relatively simpler, because now everyone knows why it's being done and what everyone's getting the same message, right? Including the training. So in fact, if I reflect back to what we had to go through at Evalueserve, for example, we switched from a pure services model to a product-led services model a few years ago, and that required change management all the way from the top, right? And the good part was we had sponsorship, executive vision already, and that made it easier. But to your point, if someone in middle management comes up with an idea, they have to go all the way up to get that buy-in and then come down, right? Otherwise, there's no way that's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Josh, I was just wondering, when you're actually doing the training that you're talking about, at least, what level of technicality are you using in this training? Because you have like people in all different roles when you're doing it, and anyone can have a very valid idea, but they might not be able to do like the actual like statistical analysis. But it doesn't mean that they couldn't think of the idea and have somebody else on a different team do it. So does that training look different for different teams, or is it?
It's sort of like Yeah, exactly. Like, depending on who I'm talking to, if it's like the senior executive people, my goal isn't to teach them how to code a neural network. My
Mm.
goal is to teach them how to ask the right questions. Um, the kind of ask the question, at the very beginning of this talk, our conversation, we were talking about all kinds of things like, who is this for? How do we know it's actually performing correctly? Because the thing is these are simple questions, but there's so much hype and there's so much technical jargon that it doesn't necessarily
Mm.
seem, it's not necessarily obvious that you should be asking them, right? Because it's just like there's so much hype and technical jargon that it's easy to be overwhelmed and think that I shouldn't be questioning it. I shouldn't be asking these things. Of course it works. It's a convolutional neural network, deep learning or something like that. Of course it's supposed to work. That's what they say, right? No, but there are basic fundamental questions that we can ask. And so at the highest level, that's what I try to focus on. How do you quantify performance of these things? And these are just questions that they need to be asking the people that are doing it. So I focus on that level. If it's more intermediate, like more middle management, I get a little bit more into the details. But it still just keeps, the goal for me is still just to keep it simple and focus on the concepts rather than the
Mm.
implementation details, and give people sort of big picture ideas of sort of what they're doing, what the one thing I think is super important is talk about what the limitations are, so just so they can calibrate their expectations, talk about applicability. So some problems are better suited for machine learning and some problems are not. So that I try to focus on those types of things. um and Yeah, and then and so I generally speaking, if you've watched my videos, if you've seen my book or whatever, I tend to like keep it keep I start very simple. Things can get very complicated, and we can get very mathy as you want to get. But the idea is to build people up from the bottom, and just to make very little or next to no assumptions about what they know, and just build them up until they can tackle whatever they need to tackle. And if that's complicated mathematics, well, we just got to keep building until you can do that. But if it's more just general ideas, then it's the learning, the climbing that learning mountain is
Nice.
a little shorter hike.
Yeah, no, that it makes sense. You have to speak their language to help them to understand, and what that language is and what they're needing to understand is going to vary naturally by the role that they have. But I think you actually teed up another piece, and I know we're kind of running a little bit low on time, and we want to have your song as well, because I promised that in the beginning.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you do very well is like you remove a lot of buzzwords from what you say, because I think to the point you were just making, you have to be very clear in how you're trying to communicate, and you're not trying. The thing about buzzwords is, if somebody said AI or artificial intelligence, I generally guarantee that you would probably have a slightly different definition than I would have for sure, and probably Rigby would have as well. So I think we would all just interpret it like to different levels of it slightly differently, and that's just like the nature of a word like that. So I think that's very powerful, that you're able to do it. I think you mentioned when we did a little like prep session,
Right.
that lingo just gets in the way.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people
totally
would relate to a deep neural network as a black box? I mean, they think of a brain-like structure, but really you don't know what's going on in there.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, Josh, I am going to give you the stage for the song now as well. I've actually been like so excited about this for a long time.
You have any requests? How about I could do
That'd be
I could do a
awesome.
song about Decisions Now podcast. How's that sound?
Love it. I love that.
Decisions now, not decisions later, not decisions that we made last week. It's decisions now.
Yay.
Yes, I think we just had our producer join the call because he loves it so
I
much.
love it.
Yeah. No, this is great. We're going to use this everywhere. So, Josh, I really enjoyed the conversation. I think what you're doing is awesome. I love that you're making knowledge more accessible and easier to understand for a whole bunch of different people. I think that's something to be commended, and I think it's just wonderful that you're doing that and putting it out there.
Right. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's been great being here, and I've you know, I'm
And
glad
likewise
you
here,
gave me
Josh.
the
Thanks,
opportunity.
thanks for joining. And I love your YouTube channel. Do what you're doing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Access the full episode of Decisions Now on our website, and don't forget to subscribe to Decisions Now podcast today.